Hello, today is the 11th of October 2025. Today I'm going to deal with Freud. As you can see, I'm all over the place, yes, with completely different subjects, but I'm usually influenced by what I'm reading or what I'm watching. And today I'm going to talk about Freud. Freud and the death of the soul, how modern psychology became a new religion. A quote from Freud. I consider myself one of um, the most dangerous enemies of religion, but they don't even seem to notice it. Another quote. I don't fear the Nazis. The enemy is religion, the Catholic Church. Those are quotes. Now, why would a psychologist see the church? Not political tyranny, not war, as his greatest enemy. Freud was one of the most influential thinkers of the 19th and 20th centuries. He didn't just create a new branch of psychology, he helped define the modern mindset. Naturalism, no supernatural reality. Progressivism, it can go by different names. Human self-redemption, that is through science. And ultimately, a new faith in man instead of God. Freud's work wasn't just psychology, it was a philosophy in disguise, even theology in disguise. And what it really aimed to do was to remove the supernatural and deify the natural, to make instinct the new God. It's a religion of despair. Freud offered consolation without hope. He wanted to hide despair under what he called resignation, but not the religious resignation of accepting, coming to accept God's will. Rather, it was resignation to meaninglessness. His peace was the peace of death. Let me explain. Without God, Freud could not accept sin, grace, or redemption. So he tried to unify the human psyche without reference to the soul. Instead, he placed unity in instinct and especially in sexual instinct. Thus began Freud's pansexualism, the idea that everything in human life, even love, even art or friendship, is rooted really in sexuality. So we go from original sin to original libido or libido. Once you remove the Christian idea of original sin, that human nature is fallen and needs grace, you need something else to explain our suffering. And Freud replaced sin with the libido. In his system, man is not wounded by sin, but ruled by desire. So the story of salvation becomes a story of repression and release, not of redemption. But here's the irony. If you tell people that this world is their paradise, they will soon realize it looks a lot more like hell. When you deny the, let's, as they call it, the myth of original sin, you end up actually with a darker myth, the Manichaean myth of the omnipotent libido. Why Freud's ideas became so popular? Well, even in errors, um, there is always a seed of truth, a kernel of truth. So before criticizing Freud or critiquing him, let's ask what made him successful? Well, one could be the scandal of sex. So let's say the anything to do with sex is rather appealing to people. Nothing grabs attention like a taboo. That's one. Another one is rebellion against the old morality. He offered a more comfortable rebellion, a comforting rebellion. His literary talent, which he did have, Freud wrote like a novelist. He even admitted once that he wanted to be one. He didn't know whether it was a vocation or a temptation. His boldness, he had the courage or the arrogance to explain everything. His discoveries, also the which he did, the unconscious, dreams, neurosis, sublimation, all fascinating. And the media helped. Freud's ideas spread as the fashionable truth, rarely questioned except by a few who refused to follow the trend. But built on error, the system quickly decayed into mythology. Even clinical practice, even his own students ended up refuting him. Now, his philosophical error, simplified obviously, the main one, his key philosophical failure was confusing potentiality with actuality. Let me explain what I mean. He collapsed the difference between what can be and what is. And that goes way back to before Plato, before Aristotle, before the pre-Socratics. To Aristotle, an acorn, you remember that old chestnut, if I can put it that way. An acorn is potentially an oak tree, not actually one. Freud erased that difference. So everything became potentially sexual, and therefore for him, actually sexual. Even a baby feeding at his mother's breast became somehow a sexual act. Well, of course, there were many critics that didn't go along with this. And when it comes to sex, especially the French, the French had a quite a field day with critiquing him. George Dumas from the Sorbonne University mocked this absurdity. He says, well, yes, the baby may one day be capable of sex, but right now, he's just hungry. This confusion infected all his theories: instinct, perversion, sublimation, even society. By the way, about the acorn and the oak tree, yes, if your mind goes therefore to abortion and the baby and so on. It's not exactly the same thing. The acorn, this is not the purpose of this video, but just in case, the acorn has the same DNA as the oak tree. Yeah. A baby from the moment of conception has a different DNA from his mother or his father. So it's a totally individual thing, and the Catholic Church believes that the soul is infused at the moment of conception. Yeah, but anyway, that's another video which I will never make because there's no point. So this confusion, as I said, infected all his other theories. The theories of instinct, the theories of perversion, of sublimation, even the theory of society. It led logically to the death drive, that bleak vision where the ultimate human instinct is towards self-destruction. The dehumanizing consequences, Freud's view of man is pessimistic. He leaves no room for free will, for the soul, for moral responsibility. In his world, everything we do is repressed instinct. The human being becomes a machine of pleasure and pain, trapped between what he called the pleasure principle and the reality principle. That's why Freud's moral system ends in hedonism, a world where pleasure is God and freedom is an illusion. So Freud's legacy is a new religion without God, really. Freud's movement became, in time, a kind of a secular religion. Its motto might as well have been all beliefs welcome here except the one religion with dogmas. A religion that accepts everything except faith itself. It promised freedom but delivered despair. It offered therapy, but therapy instead of salvation. So the conclusion, Freud's real enemy. Let's return to Freud's own words. I don't fear the Nazis. The enemy is religion, the Catholic Church. That's a quote. Why? Because the Church, with her dogmas, I think it's the only religion with dogmas, with her doctrines of sin, grace, redemption, and the soul, stood as the last obstacle between man and his new idol, himself. By the way, there were many scholars who criticized him from the very beginning, and, well, not from the very beginning, but Jung, for example, did, Weber and others. Jewish scholars, too, Freud's theories, particularly his later work on Moses, were heavily criticized by many Jewish scholars and theologians for contradicting religious tradition and history and for being overly speculative. I got this from some article. Critics, I'll read it to you. Critics specifically challenged his arguments in Moses and monotheism, which suggested that Moses was an Egyptian who was murdered by his followers, a claim that was called speculative and imaginary by figures like Professor Abraham S. C. Yehuda. Some Jewish thinkers also viewed Freud's materialism as an attack on religion in general and Judaism in particular. His rejection of traditional narratives, Freud's theories on the origins of monotheism and his interpretation of figures like Moses was seen as undermining foundational Jewish beliefs and history. The critiques of Moses and monotheism. In his final book, Freud proposed that Moses, as I said, was an Egyptian and that monotheism originated from a patricide which created a collective and conscious guilt that was later repressed. And this account was widely rejected by Jewish scholars who found it to be too speculative and imaginary. Figures like Professor Yehuda openly challenged Freud's claims, stating that Freud was unqualified to make such claims and had simply copied the theories of others. Some Jewish writers saw Freud also as part of a tradition of Jewish materialists who, like Spinoza before him, like Marx before him, were seen as being hostile to religion and Judaism. So the critics, some of them called him a magician, others called him an impostor, others called him, there was one, I don't remember who actually called him a hyena. Anyway, plenty of criticisms there from the Jewish theologians, but beyond his the critique of his psychoanalysis as a whole, beyond his specific work on religion, Freud's theories face broader criticism regarding their scientific status and reliance on a limited population, points that were also made by the Jewish community. Anyway, but Freud, there is no question that he was brilliant, no doubt. But brilliance without transcendence becomes blindness. And in the end, Freud's religion, his religion of instinct, sought to cure man's guilt, sought to cure man of guilt by curing him of his soul. Freud tried to heal man's wounds by denying the very part of him that could be healed, the soul. And what remains when you remove the soul from from psychology? What remains when you remove the soul from psychology? You end up with only a mirror. And behind it, behind that mirror, nothing. That's my talk for today. I will continue with for members only. With, you know that I did a video on Father Castellanis. I'm continuing to read him. He's he's a very prolific author. And so I'm going to, because it's to do with Catholicism, I'm going to put whatever videos I continue to do on him in the members only playlist. You will find them there. Okay? Well, thank you for listening. Bye-bye.